The sun rises slowly over the small African town of Makina, bathing its rust-colored rooftops in a golden light. Children run barefoot along dusty roads. The scent of freshly baked bread drifts from a roadside stall. And through it all, one woman moves quietly. Amara, a young nurse at the town's modest health clinic. She isn't famous. She doesn't have much, but everyone knows her gentle voice and calm smile, the way she listens when others rush, the way she stays late after her shift just to hold a trembling hand. At dawn, Amara walks the same narrow road each day, her worn shoes crunching against gravel, her white uniform pressed but faded. She carries a small bag filled with medicine, bandages, and her mother's old Bible, a constant reminder of hope. She waves to the fruit seller, helps an old woman lift her basket, and stops to wipe a child's scraped knee on the way. When she finally reaches the clinic, the chaos begins, coughing patients, restless mothers, crying babies, and the weary hum of an overworked generator. Yet Amara never raises her voice. She moves with quiet grace, tending to each soul as though they were her own family. "Next, please," she says softly. Her hands steady, but her eyes tired. Her co-workers admire her dedication, but don't understand it. To them, the clinic is just a job. Long hours, low pay, and endless complaints. They mock her kindness behind her back. Amara acts like she's saving the world, one of them whispers. Another laughs. She'll burn out soon enough. Wait and see. But Amara doesn't answer gossip with anger. When she overhears the comments, she only smiles faintly and continues her work. Her strength isn't loud. It's the kind that breathes quietly beneath pain. After hours, when the clinic empties, she often stays behind to check on patients who couldn't afford full treatment. She sneaks leftover medicine into paper envelopes, tucks them into worn hands, and says, "Don't worry, just get better." Sometimes, she even spends her own money buying food for the sick and elderly. Her supervisor, Mr. Attawale, a man of strict rules and tighter budgets, doesn't approve. "Amara," he says sternly one evening, "we can't run this place on charity. There are policies for a reason." She lowers her gaze. "I understand, sir. But sometimes policies can't hear a child cry." He sighs and shakes his head. "You're too soft for this world," she simply replies. Maybe softness is what this world needs. Outside, the town is alive with noise, motorbikes, music, laughter. But inside, Amara's world is filled with quiet moments of grace. She wraps a bandage, hums an old hymn her mother used to sing, and keeps going even when her own heart feels heavy. Because deep inside, she believes something others have forgotten, that kindness is a kind of strength. Her neighbors see her as the good nurse, the one who gives without asking for thanks. But what no one sees is the loneliness she carries. She returns home each night to a small, dimly lit apartment with peeling paint and a flickering bulb. She boils water for tea, writes in her worn notebook about the day's patients, and prays softly before bed. "Lord, help me keep giving." Even when no one understands why, her words drift into the silence, the same silence that fills her tiny room, the same silence that wraps around her life. Amara's kindness is pure. But in a world obsessed with money, rank, and reputation, it begins to draw suspicion. Some say she's pretending to be saintly. Others whisper she's secretly helping people for attention. Rumors spread like dust in the wind, unseen but suffocating. Still, she shows up every morning, smiling through the whispers. The story of Amara of Makina begins not with fame or fortune, but with an act of compassion so ordinary that most people wouldn't notice it at all. Yet soon, that same kindness, the kind she gives freely every day, will be tested in ways she never imagined. Because in a world that rewards ambition over empathy, Amara's heart will become both her greatest gift and her greatest risk. The Makina Community Hospital sits in the heart of the bustling town, a building of peeling paint, buzzing fluorescent lights, and weary faces. From the outside, it stands as a symbol of healing. But inside, Amara knows the truth. It is a place where compassion struggles to survive beneath the weight of politics, pride, and profit. Every day begins the same way, the endless line of patients stretching past the rusted gate. Mothers cradle coughing infants. Old men lean on canes. A young woman holds her arm wrapped in a torn cloth, waiting for hours. The hospital is always full, always underfunded, and always pretending everything is fine. At the center of this storm stands Mr. Dapo, the hospital administrator, a man whose shoes shine brighter than his conscience. He walks through the wards like a commander inspecting troops, his clipboard tucked under one arm, his voice sharp and cold. "Keep the waiting area clean," he snaps at a nurse. "We have visitors from the ministry coming tomorrow." He glances at a patient coughing loudly in the corner and frowns. "Move him out of sight. I don't want chaos in my hospital." To him, healing is business. Patients are statistics. He doesn't see suffering. He sees numbers, reports, and headlines. Amara tries to stay invisible when he's near. She knows that speaking up only draws his anger. But her heart refuses to stay silent when she sees injustice. That morning, as she changes bandages for a little boy with burn scars, Tunde, the hospital janitor, walks by carrying a mop and bucket. He nods shyly. Tunde is in his early 30s, a widower raising 2 small children on his meager salary. His uniform is faded, but his eyes are kind. He often sweeps quietly near Amara's ward, humming old songs to himself. "Good morning, Nurse Amara," he says. "Good morning, Tunde," she replies with a tired smile. "How are your little ones?" "They're fine," he says softly. "A bit hungry, but fine." She pauses, sensing the truth behind his words. Later, during her lunch break, she wraps half of her food in paper and slips it into his locker. She doesn't leave a note, but he knows. The next morning, he mops the hallway with a quiet tear on his cheek. Then there's Adishwa, Amara's colleague, a young nurse barely a year into the job. Adishwa watches Amara with admiration and envy. She's inspired by her courage, but too afraid to follow her example. When Amara stays late to comfort a patient after hours, Adishwa whispers, "You'll get in trouble again if Mr. Dapo finds out." Amara just smiles. "Then I'll get in trouble for the right reason." Sometimes Adeshwa joins her in secret, helping an old man find his medicine, sneaking food into the children's ward. But when supervisors pass by, she steps back quickly, pretending to chart records. Her fear is understandable. In Makina Hospital, kindness without permission is treated as rebellion. One afternoon, a poor mother arrives with her teenage daughter. The girl is pale, weak, and barely breathing. They can't afford admission. The receptionist shakes her head. No deposit, no treatment. Amara overhears and rushes over. "She needs help now," she says firmly. "It's hospital policy," the receptionist insists. "Then let policy watch her die," Amara snaps, grabbing a wheelchair and taking the girl inside. Minutes later, the girl is stabilized. Her mother weeps with gratitude. But Mr. Dapo storms into the ward, his face dark with fury. "Who authorized this admission?" he demands. Amara stands straight. "I did, sir." He slams his folder on the table. "You think this is your personal charity center?" "Who will pay for her drugs?" "I will," she says quietly. "Take it from my salary." He glares at her, speechless. "You'll learn one day that good intentions can ruin a system." She looks him in the eye. "And systems without good intentions ruin people." For a moment, silence fills the ward. Even the patients look up, sensing something sacred in her defiance. Mr. Dapo finally turns away, muttering, "You'll regret this." That evening, after everyone leaves, Amara cleans up the ward herself. She wipes the beds, changes the sheets, and hums softly to calm her nerves. Tunde helps, quietly sweeping beside her. "Why do you keep fighting them?" he asks gently. "Because someone has to remember why we're here," she answers. He nods slowly, his broom stilling for a moment. "If only the world had more of you." Outside, the night hums with crickets. Through the window, they can see the town lights flickering. Small, distant, but alive. The next day brings another test. A group of homeless children huddles near the clinic gate. They've been sleeping there since a fire destroyed their shelter. When Amara finds them, she brings bread and milk from her own kitchen and tends to their wounds. One boy, barely 6, looks up at her and says, "Are you an angel?" She laughs softly. "No, just someone who remembers what it feels like to be hungry." Later, Mr. Dapo finds out and calls her to his office. "I heard you're feeding street children with hospital supplies," he says coldly. "It wasn't from the hospital," she explains. "It was mine. That's not the point. You're creating dependency. These people need discipline, not sympathy." Amara shakes her head. "They need both," he sighs, exasperated. "Amara, this isn't a charity. It's a hospital. Follow the rules," she answers calmly. "Rules don't heal people. Compassion does." He leans forward, his tone sharp. "You think you're righteous, don't you? She simply says, "I just think people deserve to be seen." Adesua watches all this unfold, torn between fear and admiration. One night, she tells Amara, "You'll lose your job if you keep doing this." Amara smiles faintly. "Maybe, but if I stop caring, I'll lose myself." The hospital runs like a machine, efficient but heartless. Mr. Depo's superiors praise him for his discipline. Reports look good on paper, even as the poor suffer quietly outside the gates. Amara's world is one of contradictions, a place meant for healing, yet ruled by indifference. She moves through it like a candle in a storm, her light small but unwavering. And though she often wonders if her efforts matter, she doesn't stop, because deep inside, she carries a belief stronger than fear, that one person's compassion can still matter in a world that's forgotten how to feel. The morning began like any other. The hum of generators, the smell of disinfectant, and the long line of patients waiting under the scorching sun. Inside Makina Community Hospital, the day's rhythm was already set: treat, discharge, collect payments, and repeat. For Amara, it was another day to fight small battles no one else saw. She moved through the corridors with her usual calm, checking temperatures, changing dressings, offering a word of comfort where machines and charts could not. To her, medicine wasn't just about curing bodies. It was about healing hearts, but that day, fate had chosen to test her compassion in a way that would change everything. It was just after noon when a woman stumbled into the emergency ward, clutching her belly and gasping for air. Her clothes were torn, her feet dusty from miles of walking. She was heavily pregnant, perhaps 8 months along, and bleeding. The receptionist looked up, frowning. "You'll need a deposit before we can admit you," she said, without even checking her condition. "I don't have money," the woman whispered, voice trembling. "Please, just help me." "My baby?" The receptionist's eyes hardened. "I'm sorry." "That's the policy." Amara, who had just walked out of the treatment room, froze. She saw the blood trickling down the woman's leg and knew this wasn't policy time. This was life or death. She rushed forward. "Bring her in," she ordered. The receptionist hesitated. "But Nurse Amara, now!" The woman was wheeled into the maternity ward. Amara's hands moved quickly, instinctively, clamping, cleaning, checking the pulse. She shouted for supplies. "We need gloves, saline, and gauze, now!" Adesua ran in to help, trembling but determined. "Is she—" "Still breathing," Amara replied, sweat beading on her forehead. "We can't wait for a doctor. Help me." They worked in silence, except for the woman's gasps and the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, the sound of a newborn's cry pierced the air. The woman sobbed weakly as Amara placed the baby in her arms. "You're both safe now," Amara whispered. "Rest." Adesua smiled faintly. "You did it," Amara exhaled, tears forming in her eyes. "We did it." By evening, word had already spread, not about the miracle birth, but about what Amara had done. The hospital accountant had noticed the missing admission payment. A nurse reported that Amara used hospital resources without authorization. By sunset, Mr. Dapo knew everything. He called an emergency meeting the next morning. The boardroom was cold and colorless, walls lined with certificates, a portrait of the health minister staring down in judgment. Amara stood at the center like a criminal awaiting trial. Around her sat Mr. Dapo, the chief medical officer, and 2 members of the hospital board. Adesua was outside, too scared to enter. Tundi mopped the hallway nearby, pretending not to listen, but his hands were trembling. Mr. Dapo began slowly, each word sharp. "Nurse Amara, do you understand why you're here?" "Yes, sir," she said quietly. He tapped his pen. "You admitted a patient without payment. You used supplies not registered under her file. You involved junior staff in an unauthorized procedure. Do you deny this?" Amara kept her eyes on the table. "No, sir, then why?" he demanded. "Because she was dying," Amara said. "She had no money. There was no time to—" He cut her off. "No time to follow procedure? You think you're above the system?" She met his gaze. "I think human life should come before paperwork." The room fell silent. Mr. Dapo leaned back, sighing dramatically. "This is exactly the problem. You think kindness excuses disobedience. But this hospital runs on rules, not emotions." The chief medical officer nodded in agreement. "We can't allow nurses to act independently. Today it's one patient. Tomorrow it's chaos." Amara's voice trembled but did not break. If saving a woman and her baby is chaos, then maybe we need more of it. Gasps echoed. One board member muttered, "Insubordination." Mr. Dapo slammed his pen on the table. "Enough! This meeting is not a debate." He turned to the others. "The decision is clear. Her actions were reckless, unprofessional, and dangerous to the hospital's reputation." He paused, savoring the moment. "Effective immediately, Nurse Amara is dismissed." The words struck like thunder. Amara stood frozen, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. The world seemed to move in slow motion. The shuffle of papers, the squeak of chairs, the faint hum of the ceiling fan. For a second she almost spoke, almost pleaded, but something stopped her. Pride? Pain? The quiet dignity of knowing she had done the right thing? Instead, she simply nodded, understood. She turned to leave, but Mr. Dapo's voice followed her like a lash. "Let this be a lesson to everyone," he announced, loud enough for the hallway to hear. "Sentiment has no place in medicine. We save lives with rules, not with rebellion." Through the glass window, staff had gathered outside. Some looked down. Others looked away. None spoke. Adesua stood near the doorway, tears brimming in her eyes. Tunda, gripping his mop, wanted to shout, "She saved them!" But fear sealed his lips. Amara walked past them quietly, her nurse's badge clutched in her hand. Her footsteps echoed through the hall, each one heavier than the last. Outside, the mother she had saved sat under a tree, holding her newborn. When she saw Amara, she rose quickly, confusion and gratitude mixing on her face. "What's wrong?" she asked softly. Amara forced a smile. "Nothing. You and your baby are safe. That's all that matters." The woman touched her arm. "May God bless you." "You're an angel." Amara shook her head gently. "No, just a nurse without a job." The woman tried to speak, but Amara walked away, not bitter, not angry, just quiet. The kind of quiet that carries both loss and strength. That night, she sat alone in her small apartment. Her uniform lay folded on the chair, her stethoscope coiled neatly beside it. The world outside buzzed with life, cars passing, children laughing. But inside, everything was still. She replayed the meeting in her mind, the humiliation, the silence of those who once called her friend. Yet, deep down, she felt no regret. She had done what she was born to do. Still, the ache was real, the ache of being punished for goodness. She looked at her hands, the same hands that had caught a newborn life that morning, and whispered, "Was I wrong to care?" The next morning, she walked back to the hospital gates one last time. Not to beg for her job, but to say goodbye. As she approached, Tunda ran to her. "Nurse Amara, I'm so sorry. I wanted to speak, but..." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's all right, Tunde. Sometimes silence is safer." He shook his head, eyes red. "But it's not right," she smiled sadly. "No, it's not. But right things often come with pain." Adesua came running too, holding a small brown envelope. "They said you can collect your final pay," she said tearfully. Amara took it gently. "Keep it. Use it for the children's ward." "Buy them new blankets." Adesua hugged her tightly, sobbing. "You'll always be the best nurse we ever had," Amara whispered back. "Then promise me you'll care, even when no one's watching." As she walked away, the morning sun broke through the gray clouds, lighting her path. She didn't know what would come next, only that kindness, once given, never dies. Inside the hospital, Mr. Dapo's voice echoed through the halls, scolding staff and rearranging order. But outside, under that same vast sky, Amara's quiet defiance had already planted a seed, one that would grow in the hearts of those who saw what true compassion looked like. The first few days after her dismissal passed in silence. No calls, no messages, no visitors. Amara's phone lay still on the table, once buzzing with patients seeking advice, colleagues asking for help, neighbors needing favors. Now it was quiet, like the air had forgotten her name. Her small apartment, once filled with laughter from children she tutored on weekends, felt emptier with every passing day. The clock ticked loudly, mocking the stillness. The envelope Adesua had given her sat untouched for a week. When she finally opened it, the amount was barely enough to cover rent. She stared at the bills for a long time, her eyes distant, her heart heavy, not from losing the job, but from realizing how quickly goodness is forgotten. Out on the streets of Makina, gossip traveled faster than kindness ever did. At the small market near her house, she could hear whispers behind her back. "That's her. a woman murmured. The nurse who got fired. Another added. They said she disobeyed her boss. Thought she was better than everyone else. Amara pretended not to hear, though each word cut deeper than she cared to admit. When she greeted the same people she once treated for free, some smiled awkwardly, others turned away. The world loved heroes, until those heroes lost their titles. Still, she didn't fight back. She simply carried her basket of vegetables, smiled faintly, and walked home. Days turned into weeks. Her savings ran out. The lights in her apartment dimmed more often. Power cuts mixed with unpaid bills. Meals became simpler. One bowl of rice stretched into 2 days. She woke up early, tied her scarf neatly, and went out to look for work. She applied at private clinics, schools, even pharmacies, but every door led to the same polite rejection. "Oh, Nurse Amara, we've heard about your case. You're very kind, but we can't risk any trouble. Your record is clean, but the hospital board still lists you as dismissed for insubordination. Maybe after some time passes." She would thank them, bow her head, and leave quietly, never pleading, never showing anger. By the 3rd week, she stopped wearing her uniform. It felt like armor that no longer protected her. One evening, she passed by the hospital gate, the same gate she had walked through 100 times before. The guards looked at her differently now, not with respect, but with suspicion. Through the glass doors, she saw Mr. Dapo giving orders as usual, his voice echoing with authority. And then she saw the young mother she had saved, sitting in the waiting area with her baby, now healthy and laughing. For a moment, Amara's heart lifted. She smiled faintly and began to walk away. But before she turned the corner, she overheard the mother say to a nurse, "Please thank the woman who helped me that day. She saved us." The nurse hesitated. "You mean Amara? She doesn't work here anymore." "Oh," the mother whispered, looking down. "Then may God help her the way she helped me." Amara stopped walking. Her eyes filled with tears, not from sorrow, but from something deeper. Maybe heaven was watching, even when the world wasn't. Her landlord came the next week. "Madam Amara, I've been patient," he said gently, "but rent is due again." "You're 2 months behind, I know," she said softly. "Please give me a little more time," he sighed. "I respect you, but I can't afford to lose money. I'll give you till month's end." She nodded. "Thank you." When he left, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her hands, the same hands that once held life, now trembling with uncertainty. For the first time, doubt crept in like a shadow. Does kindness still matter in a world like this? What good is compassion when rules punish it and the hungry still starve? She whispered into the stillness. Maybe I was foolish. Maybe goodness isn't enough. That night it rained heavily. The roof leaked in 2 places and she placed bowls on the floor to catch the drops. The sound of rain was once her comfort. Now it was a reminder of how fragile everything had become. She lit a small candle and took out her old journal, the one where she wrote names of patients, prayers, and small miracles. The ink had faded, but her words still glowed with hope. Even when no one sees, kindness is never wasted. She read that line over and over until she fell asleep beside it. The next morning, she was awakened by a knock at the door. When she opened it, a small boy stood there, barefoot, shivering, holding an empty plastic bowl. His eyes were sunken, his voice barely a whisper. "Ma, do you have food?" She looked at him, then at her small pot, the last portion of rice she had been saving for herself. For a moment, her stomach twisted with hunger. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. But then she saw his trembling hands and remembered the woman from the hospital. The baby crying, the blood, the fear. Without thinking, she smiled faintly and said, "Come in." She scooped the rice into his bowl, added a little salt, and handed it to him. "Eat slowly," she said. "There's more if you need." He devoured the food, then looked up at her. "Thank you, Ma. My mom is sick. I'll share with her too." Amara's throat tightened. "Your mother?" He nodded. "She hasn't eaten for 2 days." Amara quickly packed the rest of her meal into a small paper bag. "Take this to her," she said. As he ran off into the rain, she stood in the doorway, the cold wind blowing against her face. Her stomach ached, but her heart felt strangely light. That evening, she sat by the window watching the sunset. The clouds glowed gold and crimson, colors of both pain and hope. In her hunger, she found peace. In her emptiness, she discovered meaning. She whispered again, "Maybe kindness doesn't need applause. Maybe it just needs faith. The boy's laughter echoed faintly in the distance, mixing with the cries of the street vendors and the rustle of the trees. Amara smiled. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice reminded her. This fall was not an ending, but a preparation. The months passed like soft pages turning, slow, quiet, almost invisible. Amara's life had shrunk into simple rhythms. Morning walks to fetch water, afternoons tutoring neighborhood children under the mango tree, evenings spent tending to the sick in her community. No salary, no title, no applause. But somehow there was peace. She had stopped waiting for the world to notice her, or for the pain of her dismissal to fade. She simply lived day by day, doing what she knew best, helping where help was needed. One Saturday afternoon, the sky over Makina shimmered with heat. The marketplace buzzed with noise, hawkers shouting, children laughing, radios blaring. Amara was on her way back from visiting a sick widow when a familiar voice called out, "Ah, Nurse Amara." She turned. It was the same woman, the mother she had helped months ago in the hospital, now healthier, radiant, holding her baby. Amara froze in surprise. You're well?" The woman nodded, eyes glistening. "Because of you." She hugged Amara tightly before pulling back. "You lost your job because of me. I wanted to say thank you, but you disappeared." Amara smiled faintly. "You don't owe me anything." "I only did what any mother would do." The woman shook her head. "No, Amara, not everyone would risk everything for a stranger." She looked at her for a long time, and in that silence, something shifted. Later that night, the woman sat in her small apartment with her phone. Her baby slept beside her. She opened a video recording app and began to speak. Meanwhile, in her little apartment, Amara had no idea. Her old phone was too old for social media notifications. She still used it mostly for texts and calls, but that morning, neighbors began to knock. "Amara, they're talking about you on the radio." "What?" "Yes, they said your story is trending. Everyone is looking for you." She stared, confused, as one of the neighborhood boys showed her a YouTube clip on his phone. The same video of the woman's testimony. Now with thousands of views, her own face appeared, calm, kind, unaware, her eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth in disbelief. "Oh my God!" The children around her clapped and laughed. "Auntie Amara is famous." But she shook her head gently. "No, children. Fame is not what I want. I only wanted her to live." That evening, journalists arrived at her home. They found her sitting outside, sorting herbs for an elderly neighbor. "Miss Amara, may we interview you?" She hesitated, then nodded politely. The camera rolled. "Why did you help her?" a reporter asked, "knowing you could lose your job?" Amara looked down, then back up. Her voice was calm, almost serene. "Because life is sacred. Rules should protect people and not abandon them." The clip went viral again. Within hours, her words were quoted in newspapers, posted on social media, translated into multiple languages. Even the hospital board couldn't stay silent. By the third day, the story had reached national television. Public outrage swelled. Protesters gathered outside the hospital with placards. "Reinstate Nurse Amara. Compassion is not misconduct. She saved lives and not broke rules." Under immense pressure, the hospital administration released a statement. "We acknowledge the recent events and are reviewing the matter. The hospital values compassion, though procedures must be respected." But it was too late. Their reputation had already cracked under the weight of the public's conscience. Amara watched it all unfold quietly. Adeshua, her former co-worker, came to see her, tears in her eyes. "You're everywhere, Amara. Everyone is talking about you." "The director? He's panicking." Amara smiled softly. "Maybe now they'll understand what kindness means." Adeshua hugged her tightly. "You never stopped believing, even when we all stayed silent." "I'm so sorry for not defending you." Amara placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Don't be sorry. We all have our fears. The world changes when one person dares to act, but it heals when others begin to see." By the end of the week, the Minister of Health invited her for an official meeting. They offered her reinstatement, not just to her old job, but as head of community outreach, a new department aimed at serving low-income families. She listened quietly, then smiled. "I'm honored," she said softly, "but I don't need titles. I just want to help however I can." The minister paused. That humility is exactly why we need you. The following Sunday, the same market that once whispered against her now overflowed with applause as she passed. Amara, God bless you, heroine of Makina. Your story gave us hope. Old women brought her fruits. Children ran to hug her. Even her landlord came forward, embarrassed and smiling. I was foolish, Nurse Amara. Your rent is forgiven. She laughed softly. Thank you, sir. But no hard feelings. We all learn. That night, Amara sat alone by candlelight, scrolling through her borrowed phone. Thousands of messages poured in. Thank you notes, prayers, stories of others inspired to help. I paid for a stranger's medicine today. You reminded me that compassion still matters. She placed the phone down, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. The same quiet she had once feared now felt sacred. A reminder that even the smallest act could ripple through hearts unseen. Morning light streamed through the thin curtains of Amara's small apartment. The walls were still bare. No new furniture, no luxury. Just a table, a few plants, and a second-hand radio playing softly in the corner. Outside, Makina was already alive. Motorbikes honking, market women calling, roosters crowing late as usual. But this morning, something felt different. As Amara poured herself tea, her phone began to vibrate non-stop. Calls, messages, notifications. Her friend Adesua burst through the door, out of breath, holding a newspaper. Amara, she gasped. You're on the front page, again! Amara blinked. What? Adesua unfolded the paper and showed her. There it was, a full-page photo of Amara, smiling gently during her interview, her eyes kind yet steady. The nurse who chose compassion over rules. Amara inspires the world. Amara laughed softly. Half in disbelief, half in embarrassment. This is too much, Adesua. I only did what anyone should do. Adesua shook her head. No, Amara, you did what most people wouldn't. Over the next few days, the storm of attention grew beyond imagination. Every major television station wanted her story. Radio presenters quoted her words. At first, she hesitated, afraid that fame might drown the message. But Adesua encouraged her. Speak, Amara. The world needs to hear your voice. So she agreed. The host smiled warmly. Welcome, Miss Amara. You've become a global symbol of kindness. Tell us, how does it feel? Amara shifted slightly in her seat, uncomfortable under the bright lights. I don't think I'm a symbol, she said softly. I'm just someone who couldn't ignore another person's pain. The interviewer leaned in. You lost your job for helping someone who couldn't pay. Was it worth it? There was a pause. Cameras zoomed in. Amara looked straight into the lens, her voice calm but powerful. If being kind is a crime, I'll gladly be guilty again. The studio went silent. The host's eyes softened. That's a quote the world will remember. Famous artists painted murals of her face on city walls. Poets wrote verses. Students quoted her during graduation speeches. Even children began calling her Auntie Amara, the kind nurse. A week later, Amara received an invitation she could hardly believe from the United Nations Humanitarian Council. They wanted her to speak at a global conference on compassion in public service. Adesua stared at the email, speechless. You're going to New York, Amara. Do you understand? The whole world will hear you. Amara chuckled softly. I don't even have a passport yet. Within days, donations poured in to help her travel. The Ministry of Health fast-tracked her documents, calling her Nigeria's ambassador of compassion. Inside a grand conference hall, world leaders and humanitarian workers filled their seats. From Makina, Nigeria, a woman whose kindness reminded us what humanity truly means. Please welcome Miss Amara. She walked onto the stage in a simple cream-colored dress. No jewelry, no fanfare, just grace. The audience rose in applause. When the clapping faded, Amara spoke softly into the microphone. I was taught that kindness is like water. It takes the shape of wherever it's poured. I didn't plan to be here. I only wanted to help one person who was suffering. But that's the power of kindness. It multiplies. When we least expect it, her voice trembled slightly but grew, stronger with every word. The world measures success by titles and money. But the truest wealth is the ability to care. When I lost my job, I thought I had lost everything. But I learned that when you give love freely, you never run out. It keeps finding its way back. Tears glistened in the audience. When she finished, the entire hall rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, weeping. Later that night, her speech aired globally. Messages poured in from India, Brazil, South Africa, and the U.S. Doctors, nurses, teachers, people from all walks of life wrote that they were inspired to be guilty of kindness too. Back home in Makina, the small town was alive with pride. Children painted her quote on the school wall. Her old hospital, now under new leadership, placed a sign near the entrance. In honor of Amara, let compassion guide our care. You taught me what no policy ever could. I was wrong. Thank you for reminding me that medicine without mercy is just machinery. Amara wept as she read it, not from anger but from grace. Soon after, global NGOs and philanthropists began reaching out. They wanted to partner with her to create something lasting, but she had only one condition: no offices in big cities, no fancy cars. The foundation must begin where people feel forgotten. So they listened, and together they formed the Amara Foundation for the kind and the poor. Its mission was simple: to support those who choose kindness, even when it costs them something. It funded free clinics in rural areas, scholarships for nursing students, and community centers that taught empathy alongside skill. Amara refused to take a salary. I already have what I need, she said, a purpose. One evening, months later, she stood outside her new community clinic as the sun dipped below the horizon. The wind was gentle, carrying distant laughter and the smell of fresh rain. Time magazine honors Amara among top 100 most influential people. Amara smiled, shaking her head. All this for a bowl of medicine and a bit of courage. Adiswa laughed. No, my friend. All this for a heart that refused to stop caring. She looked out toward the road where it all began, where she had once been escorted out of the hospital, humiliated and jobless. Now that same road led to a clinic named after her. Maybe this was the path all along. The sky deepened into gold and violet. The world was still noisy, still imperfect, but her story had become a small light in it. And somewhere, in countless hearts across the world, that same light was spreading, invisible, unstoppable, eternal. It began quietly, with an email. The sender, Mr. Depo, Chief Administrator. St. Francis Medical Center. Apology and request. Amara read it 3 times before believing it was real. Dear Miss Amara, I have watched your journey with humility and shame. You showed the world what true compassion means, something I once failed to see. I wish to meet you, not as your former superior, but as a man seeking redemption. Please come if your heart allows. Sincerely, Dapo Adekunle. Amara stared at the screen for a long time. Her hands trembled slightly. She hadn't thought of him in months. Not with bitterness and only as part of a chapter that was finished. But maybe, she thought, this was the final piece of that chapter. Forgiveness. I will come. Tomorrow. Doctors and nurses turned as Amara walked in. Whispers rippled through the hallway. That's her, the nurse who stood up for kindness. She's here again. Her heart pounded, not from fear but from something deeper, remembrance. As she stepped into the boardroom, everything looked the same. The long table, the framed certificates, the polished floor. But the faces around it were different, softer, expectant. Mr. Depo stood up immediately. He looked older, his once perfect posture slightly bent, his eyes tired but genuine. He approached her slowly, extending his hand. Amara, he said, voice low. You have no idea how much I owe you an apology. She shook his hand, her smile gentle. You owe me nothing, sir. We all learn differently. But he insisted. No, please, let me say this. He turned to the other administrators and staff gathered around the table. When I fired this woman, I thought I was protecting the hospital's image. In truth, I was destroying its soul. Silence filled the room. He continued, his voice breaking slightly. She disobeyed me to help a patient who couldn't pay. At the time, I saw it as insubordination. Now I see it was the purest form of humanity. He motioned to a projector screen behind him. Amara blinked, surprised. Mr. Depo smiled faintly. We changed everything. No patient is turned away because of poverty anymore. Every employee receives empathy training. And this, he gestured to the wall, this motto was inspired by you. The staff began to clap softly, some with tears in their eyes. Then a nurse stepped forward, one of her old colleagues. Chioma, Amara, I wanted to speak that day in the meeting, but I was afraid. I watched you walk out, and I felt like we had failed not just you, but what we stood for. Forgive me, Amara's eyes softened. There's nothing to forgive, Kioma. Fear is human, but love is stronger. And now you've chosen that. Kioma hugged her. Tightly, reporters surrounded Amara and Mr. Dapo as they unveiled the new Compassion First initiative. Behind them stood banners showing the hospital's new community outreach program, free medical care for widows, orphans, and the homeless. A journalist raised a microphone. Miss Amara, how does it feel to see this transformation? Amara smiled gently, glancing at Mr. Dapo. It feels right, because forgiveness is also a kind of healing. And today, I think we all got a little healthier. The crowd more unexpected began to happen. People she once helped started to find her. First came the woman she'd secretly treated months ago, the one who couldn't pay hospital fees, the one whose kindness had sparked it all. Her name was Funk. She arrived with her daughter, now healthy, smiling, holding a small bouquet of sunflowers. Tears filled Amara's eyes as the child ran up and hugged her. Are you the nurse who helped my mama? Amara knelt down. Yes, little one. Funk smiled, her voice trembling. I prayed I'd see you again. You didn't just save me, you saved her. And now I can work, I can live. Thank you. They embraced, both women weeping softly. Over the next few weeks, others came too. Patients she'd comforted after hours, an old man whose medicine she'd paid for in secret, even a homeless boy she used to feed near the hospital gates. Each one brought a story, a small gift, a thank you whispered from the heart. It was overwhelming, yet deeply grounding. One evening, as Amara stood watching the sunset outside the hospital, Mr. Dapo approached her quietly. He held a small envelope. Inside was a formal offer letter. Position, Head Nurse, St. Francis Hospital. Title, Director of Compassion Training. He smiled. We'd like you back. Officially this time. Amara looked at the paper, then at the building, the same one that had once cast her out. She took a deep breath. Sir, I'm deeply honored, but my path has changed. Dapo frowned slightly. Changed? Yes. She smiled. You've already built compassion here. My work now is to plant it elsewhere. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning. The Amara Foundation. She nodded. It's time to grow it. He extended his hand again, this time not as a superior, but as an equal. Then allow us to be your partners. We'd be honored to fund your first clinic. She hesitated, touched. That would mean everything. Dapo smiled. You already mean everything. To this hospital, to this city, to every person who ever doubted the power of one good heart. Months later, the clinic is thriving. The townspeople call it the House of Mercy. Amara's name becomes synonymous with hope. Children chant her name when they play. Old people bless her name when they pray. And every time someone says, "You've changed the world," she shakes her head and answers, "I didn't change the world. I only showed it what it could be." The sun rose slowly, bathing the rooftops in gold. The same small town where Amara's story began had transformed. New schools, free clinics, community centers humming with life. Women stood in line at a food bank, laughter soft and easy. Young doctors in white coats greeted patients at the Foundation's hospital, the House of Mercy, now the largest charitable medical center in the region. Children recited poems about compassion at an annual event called Kindness Day. And on day, every wall in every office, every schoolroom, a framed photograph of Amara smiled back at the people she inspired. The same gentle eyes, the same quiet strength. They fired her for being kind, but the fire of her kindness lit the world. He stands before a group of new hospital administrators, speaking at a leadership seminar. Once I thought kindness was a distraction, a weakness. But I was wrong. It's the foundation of everything we build. He pauses, looking at a portrait of Amara hanging behind him. She taught me that rules without compassion are just walls, and we were never meant to build walls. We were meant to build doors. Applause fills the room. Dedicated to Amara Ease, who gave hope to the forgotten. Kindness costs nothing, but changes everything. A young nurse pauses beside the plaque, tracing the engraved name with her fingers. She turns to a patient nearby and smiles. "Did you know her?" the patient asks. The nurse shakes her head gently. "No, but I feel like I do, every time I help someone." She never sought fame, never built monuments, but she built hearts, thousands of them, and those hearts carried her forward, across borders, across time. On stage stands the Amara Global Foundation banner. A woman, Funk, now an executive director, addresses the audience. Behind her, a massive screen plays photos of Amara through the years, helping patients, teaching children, sitting under a tree, sharing food with a homeless boy. She helped me when the world had forgotten my name. Today, we remember hers in every heartbeat that chooses kindness. The crowd stands, applauding for a full minute, not in noise but in reverence.